Office politics can be really tricky, right? It's one of those things that often feels like a soap opera, especially in places like Westminster, where personal relationships and where you sit in the office can dictate so much of the dynamics. But, it's worth noting that the relationship between Sue Gray, who was Keir Starmer's former chief of staff, and some members of his team early in his leadership was actually worse than what has been reported. Yeah, it's interesting how that plays out. Gray isn't the first outsider to struggle with Starmer's tightly knit, politically charged team, which was heavily involved in his leadership campaign and subsequent election strategies. For example, his previous chief of staff, Sam White, left after just over a year. So, it's clear there's something about that environment that can be, challenging. Now, even though there weren't any major personal conflicts between Gray and Morgan McSweeney, who has since taken over her role, there were definitely two distinct power centers within the operation. And, that situation wasn't really sustainable. It's like when you have competing factions, it's hard to maintain a unified front. Now, though, it seems like things have shifted. There's been a clean sweep, and the political team has emerged more cohesive, enjoying the loyalty of most special advisors and several cabinet ministers. Many within Labour attribute the party's election victory to this team, which means there's less room to point fingers at others for any upcoming mistakes. It's kind of interesting, though, because Gray was often seen as the person to blame for various missteps that tainted Labour's initial days in government. She was positioned as the ethical overseer, the one who crafted the structure of the team in No. 10, and she was responsible for vetting donors and appointments. So when donations from Wahid Ali to Starmer and others raised eyebrows, guess who became the convenient scapegoat? Yeah, that's right, Gray was suddenly the one in the hot seat. It was said that Gray was pretty adamant about wanting to maintain control over special advisors, keeping their numbers low and contracts tight. So when infighting erupted or salaries were slashed, she became the target for those issues. For instance, the awkward situation with Rachel Reeves appointing her advisor Ian Corfield as a civil servant. Yeah, that kind of thing reflects poorly on the leadership, right? And during the election campaign, Gray was reportedly in charge of overseeing the transition to government, managing the first 100 days, and prioritizing key legislation and political moments. So, when the government found itself mired in controversies over cronyism and favoritism, Gray became the easy target for criticism. It's like, when the heat is on, you look for someone to blame, and she fit that bill. But it would be pretty unfair to pin all the blame on Gray. Many critics are aware of this. There have been mistakes across the board, and some more seasoned figures in Whitehall are pretty scathing about the notion that all of it rests on her shoulders. For example, the discontent regarding the cuts to winter fuel payments. That wasn't on her. She was the one who halted some of the harsher tactics during Labour's selection process, including calling out the treatment of Diane Abbott. Plus, she played a significant role in improving Starmer's relations with regional leaders and his female cabinet ministers, where communication had previously been lacking. So, when things went south, it was natural for the scapegoat to be the person who was supposed to ensure everything ran smoothly. As one veteran pointed out during a late-night chat at the Labour conference, it may not have been all her fault, but it was certainly her problem to deal with. Yeah, that's the way it often goes in politics. Throughout the conference, there was a lot of chatter among disgruntled MPs and staff about the lack of a coherent narrative. It was kind of humorous when one special advisor showed up at a late-night drinks party in Liverpool with this ridiculously large rucksack. His colleague joked, "What's in the bag? Have you finally found our transition to government plans? It's a telling sign of the frustration simmering under the surface, right?" But now, in No. 10, there seems to be a sense of optimism that Starmer's team will be more unified moving forward. They're supposedly less focused on internal squabbles and ready to concentrate on the bigger picture. However, their inexperience could be a potential weak spot. Luckily, McSweeney's deputies, Jill Cuthbertson and Vidya Alakasan, have previous experience in Downing Street, which should help. McSweeney himself comes in with a good amount of goodwill from key aides and ministers, although many backbench MPs are a bit wary of him. But hey, at least there's finally one cohesive team in charge instead of competing factions, which should hopefully streamline decision-making. That said, if this reset doesn't lead to a clear purpose and direction for the government, there won't be any place left to hide. The responsibility for setting and communicating that vision ultimately lies with Starmer himself. So, it's like the onus is really on him to steer this ship in the right direction. As we look at this whole scenario, it's fascinating to see how office dynamics can influence political landscapes, right? The intricacies of interpersonal relationships, the battle for influence, and the constant quest for cohesion all play into how a party operates. It's kind of a reminder that behind the scenes, there's so much more going on than what meets the eye. In conclusion, while the spotlight often shines on the public figures, the inner workings of their teams can be just as telling. The evolution of relationships within Starmer's team, especially in light of Sue Gray's departure, is indicative of the broader challenges faced in navigating the often turbulent waters of politics. It's a complex web, but at the end of the day, the effectiveness of the government will hinge on how well Starmer and his team can align their goals and communicate their vision to the public. And that's where the real test lies.
Thanks for watching our video. Please hit the bell icon and subscribe the channel. Thank you.